Welcome to a new video in this series. It's been such a long time since I've made a video in this lane, and I just uploaded my top 500 hip-hop artists list. If you followed me for a while now, you know I'm not someone who cares a lot about influence as an argument when it comes to ranking artists or releases. This video will go into my 5 biggest reasons why I believe that influence is an overrated criteria and my issues with it. Before I begin, I have to bring back an old friend of the channel. You know him, you love him. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Nathan.
Hey everybody!
Nathan has been with me since the beginning of the channel, and he's going to be used to address any potential counter-arguments that could be thrown my way. Also, keep in mind, the purpose of this series is solely to expose another point of view, not to change any minds. As long as you can walk away understanding my position, my work has been done. So no more pleasantries, let's get into reason number 1. My first issue with influence is that it only tells you who or what came first, not who does it better, which is what the discussion should be in my opinion. It is a fact that when an idea or technique is introduced, the creator is testing boundaries. By nature, some aspects will be rough, unrefined, or incomplete. Later artists learn from what came before. They see what worked, what didn't, and push the idea further, improving execution, expanding concepts, and or applying it in new ways. I've made this comparison before, but if you played baseball your whole life, but never made it to the MLB, but you teach your son, who does make it to the pro leagues, then who's the better player? Your son is, obviously. It doesn't matter if you influenced him, he plays better, so he's better. Changing the game sounds impressive, but art will always evolve, and later artists can and will refine and eventually perfect what was initially introduced. That is a fact, not an opinion. Where we can differ is where something or someone executes the ideas or techniques better. For example, to go to my 5 reasons why Kendrick Lamar is a better rapper than Eminem video, anyone will tell you Eminem influenced Kendrick included. But I and many others would argue that Kendrick has taken the influence and has improved upon it, surpassing M. If you disagree and think that Kendrick has not surpassed the standards M set and feel that a pioneer executes their idea the best, then that's a perfectly valid argument. But let's have that be the discussion, because that's a way more productive and interesting debate, because it focuses on skill, creativity, and refinement and less on timing. Nobody would ever say that the first basketball players were the best, despite the fact that they literally changed the game. Larry Bird and Magic Johnson were huge influences on Michael Jordan, but nobody would argue that they're better players than Jordan. So why can't we apply that same logic to music? Pablo Picasso and Georges Braque started Cubism, a new art style where they broke things into simple geometric shapes. Their first pieces were kind of experimental and stiff, but later artists like Juan Gris took their ideas and made the art look cleaner, more balanced, and overall more polished. Claude Monet's early impressionist paintings like Impression Sunrise did an amazing job showing quick changes in light and color, but they sometimes looked a bit rough and sketchy. Later artists like Pierre-Auguste Renoir and Edgar Degas used his ideas to make art that looked richer, more detailed, and more refined. The 1927 movie Metropolis by Fritz Lang was groundbreaking with its visuals and dystopian story, even though the technology back then was limited. Later directors like Ridley Scott with Blade Runner in 1982 built on those ideas, creating even richer visuals, deeper worlds, and a more polished, refined look. The 1922 movie Nosferatu set the stage for horror films with its use of shadows and suspense. But later filmmakers like Alfred Hitchcock took it further. With movies like Psycho in 1960, he mastered tension, pacing, and psychological depth in ways Nosferatu could only hint at. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein basically kicked off the entire modern sci-fi novel, exploring the moral questions of creating life. Later writers like H.G. Wells, who wrote The War of the Worlds, built on that, taking imaginative ideas and telling them with sharper and more polished stories. Jane Joyce's Ulysses pushed limits with its stream of consciousness style writing. Later writers like William Faulkner with The Sound and the Fury used that idea too, but made it more structured and easier to follow while keeping the emotional and literary depth. So to repeat myself, it shouldn't matter about who does things first, or rather who does things better. My next reason for why influence isn't a valid argument to me is that there is no correlation to quality. Just because someone inspired others doesn't mean that their lyrics, wordplay, or storytelling are top tier. You can have a huge impact without being technically excellent, and vice versa. Not every talented artist is influential, and not every influential artist is talented. For example, names such as Vanilla Ice and Criss Cross were highly influential for their time, but nobody in their right mind would ever argue that they're better MCs than people like Jean Grey or Idea, who don't have a fraction of the impact. It's not like this is an exception to the rule, it's pretty prevalent across the music scene. Emo rappers like Lil Peep and XXXTentacion were super influential to the emo rap scene, and a lot of current faces in mainstream hip-hop. I mean, they ushered an entire new subgenre, love 'em or hate 'em. But that doesn't mean they're both top-tier rappers, and they weren't. They were both exceptionally mediocre if you ask me. A lot of the times, influence has to do with timing, marketing, and promotion, and less to do with artistic merit. A song or style might be copied widely simply because it's accessible, catchy, or trendy, not because it demonstrates superior skill. Finally, for this section, I'll also say that what people claim is quote-unquote influential may be subjective or based on a narrative rather than technical analysis. Influence is also rewritten in retrospect, but that doesn't retroactively make the work superior. Building off of that, my next argument is that people are not consistent with who this applies to. The same people who apply influence as a strength for Tupac, Biggie, and Nas would never apply it as a strength for Lil Wayne, Young Thug, or Future. The problem is that if we're going to use it as a strength for the first three names, then let's stay consistent and apply it as a strength for the other three MCs. It's unfair to only apply it as a strength for Pac and Biggie and not for Wayne and Future. It's either always a strength or always a weakness, or be like me and don't care about it much. Going back to the previous argument for a moment, because there's a non-direct correlation to skill, quality, or talent, it's unfair and inconsistent to pick and choose where it reflects these things and where it doesn't. Era bias is another issue. Influence also gets cherry-picked based on the era someone personally values. Older artists are often assumed to be more quote-unquote foundational, whereas newer artists' influence is downplayed because people haven't fully internalized the cultural shift yet. Take trap music. ATL names like Young Thug and Migos are seen as quote-unquote trendy and temporary by many, but they are massively influential regardless of your opinion on them. They change cadence, flow, vocal delivery, and song structure. But because their work exists in the newer era, people frame them as derivative or niche. Location plays another factor. Sometimes influence is measured unevenly depending on location. East Coast rappers might be praised more in hip-hop history rather than West Coast or Southern artists, even if the latter shaped entire subgenres. Particularly, New York legends like Nas, Rakim, or Biggie are frequently celebrated as the quote-unquote definitive voices in hip-hop, even though West Coast and Southern artists have created entire subgenres that have reshaped the culture. West Coast artists like Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre pioneered G-Funk and mainstream gangsta rap, while Southern names like Outkast and T.I. heavily influenced and pioneered trap, crunk, and the stylistic evolution of modern hip-hop. Yet they're often underrepresented in discussions of influence. Snoop helped define West Coast G-Funk and mainstream gangsta rap, but often gets less quote-unquote critical influence credit than Nas despite shaping the whole regional sound. Dr. Dre produced and launched the careers of multiple incredible and iconic rappers, yet when influence is discussed in context of lyrical skill, his genius sometimes gets minimized. Outkast revolutionized Southern hip-hop and mainstream rap, introducing new flows, production styles, and cultural aesthetics, but are again often underrepresented in discussions of quote-unquote classical influence. T.I. was the king of the South, and influenced trap and mainstream rap culture, but discussions of hip-hop influence often skip over his contributions compared to East Coast artists. Additionally, it also intersects with exposure. Most histories of hip-hop are written in New York and Los Angeles, which can unintentionally skew perception. As a result, influence is often cherry-picked to favor certain regions, giving the impression that one area produced the most influential artists while overlooking the equally transformative contribution of others. Next, building off the previous, is that it is a vague term, or rather, not one people clearly define and apply consistently. Influence isn't solely how one artist borrows from another. There are lots of other factors that count as influence. People can easily over and or underestimate how influential someone is, because with the exception of extreme cases, it's not quantifiable. Take Kendrick Lamar. People love to argue that Kendrick has quote-unquote no influence, which is preposterous and objectively false. Being the first MC to win a Pulitzer Prize, having tracks being used as anthems for the Black Lives Matter movement, having colleges studying his lyrics, records being inducted into Harvard's library, having the highest rated album on music rating sites, being the first solo rapper to headline the Super Bowl, being in charge of the Black Panther soundtrack, one of the highest grossing movies of all time. This all counts as influence, but because it's Kendrick and he debuted after 1994, nobody wants to give him credit for it, which is just bias and unfair. I can guarantee you, I'd bet this entire channel that if it was Tupac or Nas who won the Pulitzer instead of Kendrick, people would be fighting tooth and nail to include this on their resume, which we should. That would be the right thing to do. But more from that, his influence comes more as being a benchmark for the craft of hip-hop and less as a trendsetter, which I will get into in a moment. Think Andrea Tarkovsky for film, Caravaggio and Mark Rothko for visual art, or Haruki Murakami for literature. Like Kendrick, these figures have influence from showcasing a level of talent and artistry that sets a new bar, not necessarily from being a template for others to copy. Again, Kendrick's impact is benchmark-based, not mimicry-based. But that also doesn't mean that Kendrick hasn't influenced other rappers. There are dozens of artists who have been influenced by him. J. Cole, Logic, Joey Badass, Saba, Smino, Reason, J.I.D., Denzel Curry, Mip Jenkins, Isaiah Rashad, Westside Boogie, No Names, Kuba Q, J-Rock, IDK, YG, Absol, Earth Gang, Chris Crack, Nipsey Hussle, Samad Savage, Sylvan LaCue, Vince Staples, Meek Mill, Vic Mensa, Goldlink, Chance the Rapper, Anderson .Paak, Corday, Coda the Friend, Amine, Polo G, Bishop Nehru, Mac Miller, Tory Lanez, Rhapsody, Little Sims, Tyler the Creator, and many more. Guys like Denzel Curry and Tyler the Creator have cited Kendrick as being influential to them and that they influence him to stay hungry and try new things.
I'm just gonna live in my own universe because that's the only way I'll be the best in my own world. This is my world. If I'm the main character, I gotta do main character shit. If the main character is gonna get stronger, the main character is gonna get stronger. If the main character is gonna make some iller music than what he already created, he's gonna go Super Saiyan making the iller music that he's about to create. You know what I mean? So I would say Kendrick's not better than me. When I said that shit, I'm a fucking idiot for saying that shit. Because he's not. Nobody's better than me. I don't give a fuck who you are. And I'm not to sound arrogant, it's because I know who I am, I know what world I stay in, and comparing my art, you can't. Like, I can't compare my art to Kendrick's. It may have the same type of message, but I can't never compare my art to his. I can't compare my art to X. I can't compare my art to any of these other people that's around here, because I know who the main character is in my world. If I make him if he's the main character in my world, then I'm a secondary character. No, I'm living as the main character in my vision, because this is what I see every day. I don't see him every day. He's just a part of a chapter. That's it.
That also raises another issue. For the longest time, Kendrick was the current generation, so there weren't very many people to influence. Now that he's not quote-unquote one of the new guys anymore, we can see who in the current rap landscape takes influence from him, and there's plenty to see. Some of the new faces that clearly take influence from him are Makemi Dixon, the Koreatown Oddity, Baby Keem, Group Therapy, or Party of Two as they're now known as, Javi Darko, Jacqueline the Divine, Big Seven the Ronin, KJ, Brittany Carter, Jeff, Hakeem Ali, Doechii, D-Smoke, Wally the Savage, Young Senju, Malcolm, Arden, Ben Riley, Yanni, Jimmy Poindexter, Kenny Mason, Miles Monday, just to name a select few. Check out my top 50 best 2020s rappers if you want to hear more from these guys. Even somebody like Ice Spice said she was bumping Kendrick Lamar and his To Pimp a Butterfly album heavily, and sonically and stylistically she borrows nothing from Kendrick. Just because someone doesn't parade around in interviews listing someone as an influence doesn't mean them or their work isn't influential. Finally, I don't like influence as an argument because it is non-linear. In other words, it isn't just older artists influencing newer ones. The opposite can be true as well, and peers can also influence each other. The biggest example I can think of newer names influencing older artists is Kanye West. Most of his albums are showcases for the current landscape of hip-hop. Current day artists inspire him to push forward and experiment with new ideas when it comes to his production and rapping. Or for a better example, look at Nas in his amazing 6-album run with Hit-Boy, while Hit-Boy isn't a rapper. Is this not an older name being influenced by a newer name to try something new and stay hungry? I spoke about peer-to-peer influence with Kendrick Lamar influencing several of his contemporaries like J. Cole and Logic. Kendrick once again has been cited as an influence by his elders like Common, Nas, Jay-Z, Eminem, and more. Check out my top 100 unreleased Kendrick Lamar songs video for receipts. Even legends in the music industry like Prince and David Bowie have cited Kendrick as being influential to them. Prince was actually supposed to be on To Pimp a Butterfly. This is important to note because again, people don't count this. They only look at how older artists influence the newer generation, what makes it unfair to newer artists. And to add to that, influence generally favors older artists for timing and no other reason. Whether you're comparing big older names to big newer names or obscure older names to obscure newer names, the older artist in general is going to have the advantage and win most of these comparisons simply by existing. Older artists always get credit first simply because they existed first. Newer artists innovating in the same area are often labeled as quote-unquote influenced by older artists even if they improve upon or surpass them. Most people conflate influence with cultural significance or popularity. It's often misused as a shortcut to validate legendary status. Here I want to talk about some extra points that didn't fit anywhere else, but I still wanted to discuss them. This one is just a nitpick and not really much of an argument, hence why I'm putting it here, but I just find it very pretentious to factor influence in heavily. Every time I say I don't care about influence, the claim is always, "You just don't know hip-hop." It's not that I don't know, I just don't care. That might sound harsh, but I've given you my reasons why I don't care about it. There's really no correlation in counting influence and knowledge of something. People just love to toss around the influence argument without fully sitting down and thinking if it's valid. Next, I want to flesh out a point I made before about influence having a lot to do with framing, marketing, and promotion. Building off of that, someone can be influential because of fashion, social media presence, politics, or lifestyle, and not through actual sound or lyrical content. Tupac, for example, was influential for his activism and personality just as much as his rapping. Kanye West influenced music through production, innovation, and controversy, not always through his rapping. Like I said earlier, influence comes from all sorts of things, not just artistic merit. Furthermore, a lot of quote-unquote influential artists' legacies fade fast when their music stops hitting. Compare someone like a Cannabis, someone who was never a mainstream success, to a Nelly who was influential. One was forgotten by the culture, the other by the art. There's two kinds of forgotten, the kind where the culture stops saying your name, and the kind where the art stops defending it. True artistry can hold its own even when the influence dies. If influence mattered as much as people say, critics would never evolve. Art will progress. As I said before, that is a fact. Ranking based on influence traps things in nostalgia. It rewards pioneers forever, even if they get destroyed by later generations technically. As I said before, influence favors older artists generally and is unfair towards newer artists. It's like saying Babe Ruth is better than any modern baseball player because he quote-unquote influenced the game. No, he just came first. If we kept rewarding those who came first instead of looking at who does things better, then everyone's best rappers list would be wrong, and the conversation would get really boring.
But influence reflects cultural impact and longevity.
Sure, I don't deny that, but cultural significance doesn't mean artistic superiority. A song like Happy Birthday has lasted over a century, but that doesn't make it a masterpiece. Nobody would ever put it on a best songs of all time list. Nostalgia plays a big factor in influence, but that has no correlation to craft. In short, longevity measures reach, not skill.
It acknowledges the chain of inspiration.
But influence is inevitable, not meritorious. Every artist is influenced by someone. That doesn't mean the earlier name deserves perpetual credit. By this logic, every caveman with a drum deserves props for every album made today. It's a condition of creation, not a sign of greatness.
It's part of storytelling and identity in hip-hop.
Legacy doesn't equate quality. Hip-hop is about skill in truth-telling, not lineatorship. Respecting forefathers is cultural, but ranking them higher because they came first is bias. Heritage matters emotionally, not critically.
It helps explain evolution.
Correct. It explains history, but not quality. Influence, in my opinion, should belong in documentaries, not rankings. Like I said repeatedly, it's useful for mapping how we got here, not who is better. It's historical context, not a grading metric. Those are my reasons why I don't like influence as an argument. I felt this was an important video to make because in my opinion, the YouTube community overvalues this criteria heavily, which I disagree with. Let me know what you think about the influence argument. Should it be factored in discussions? Is it overvalued? What should the next video in the series be? As always, this is just an opinionated piece and you're welcome to disagree. All I hope is that you can walk away understanding my position. Thanks for watching.